Yay! How many of you have kids that just went back to school? Are you guys like running a marathon like I have been for the last couple of weeks? Good. So let's relax. Let's learn a few things today. I'm very excited to introduce a very dear friend of mine, but also an amazing person who's done a lot in her career. This is Fran Stephenson, and she, more than anyone I know, she has been the crisis queen. She's been doing crisis pretty much all of her career, since the first day she walked on the job. And she does amazing crisis plans for companies, and she's worked with big major brands that have lots of crises, and still do. And so I met her in San Antonio, and she was so kind to drive all the way over here just to talk to us today for nothing except for just because I asked her to. So give her a hand for that. Yeah. I will pay for her breakfast, but other than that, she did it herself. So I'm really proud to have her here. So Fran has a long and storied career. I have put her bio, so I'm not going to reread it. But I met her whenever she was working at SeaWorld San Antonio. She was the one who hired me there in 2005 and still working there, thank you. And she has gone on to work for Rackspace, and she now has her own consultancy. So she has a lot of experience that I'm really excited to tell you about. So why don't you tell us how you got into this crisis sideline that you managed to get into?
Well, I think I have SeaWorld to thank for that, although in the beginning, right out of college, my first internship was for the mayor of the city of Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And, if you want to really learn on your feet and learn quickly, then you work for an elected official. And I worked for free. I worked for the resume builder. How many of you done that? Yeah. And we had, early on in my career, a very unfortunate incident where a major official in the city government killed himself on city property while I was on duty, 1 day a week, 6 hours. And we had, 3 hours to write the press release and get ready to meet the press. And I was just totally in the background. There was a public information officer and a media relations director, and I got a sense back then of what handling a crisis meant. And this is serious. Someone lost their life, and so I think by the time I got to SeaWorld, I thought, oh, I can do this. But that every time you think I got this, the world changes, and you don't, and you have to adapt. So that's really how I got started.
So you gave me a list, this laundry list of crises that you've handled. So I kind of want you to rattle off that laundry list so you can get an idea of the different types of things she can talk about.
Fire on the set, construction worker dies on the job, and you're the job. Bomb threat, domestic violence, someone with an illness, a severe illness, drove through the gate. Lots of, we have a water park, and so just about every day there's a rescue of some kind in the water park. Oh yeah, and part of my tenure at SeaWorld, I was the manager of their airship operations. They used to have an airship painted like Shamu, and yeah, it's a blimp, like you've seen the Goodyear blimp here in Houston frequently, and we trolled all of the major sporting events, Daytona 500, the Super Bowl, and back when Desert Shield became Desert Storm, we were going to be the eye in the sky for the Super Bowl because that's what blimps do. And we got an unspecified threat, a la Black Sunday. How many of you saw the movie or read the book way back when? Okay. It's, that's a crisis on steroids. So we had this unspecified threat. So for the rest of the week, we checked in and out of the airport with the FBI. We got scanned. And instead of covering the Super Bowl, we were afar watching the Black Hawk helicopters circle the stadium as Whitney Houston sang the national anthem because the president was going to be there. So unspecified threat. And this was this was in the 80s or in the early 90s. Long before terrorism became a part of our daily lives. We've had domestic violence, crimes committed, and some things that, weather-related crises are extremely common for any organization. You're going to lose power, means you're going to lose customers, or people are at danger for their life and limb, so to speak. And then when I was with Rackspace, a massive server outage, which it may not be a loss of life, but it's a loss of people's livelihoods, which is equally scary for a small business or a large business who is on e-commerce. So, when are we back online? How are you going to fix this? What happened? That kind of thing. So they've run the gamut, certainly.
So that just gives you an idea, a taste of what we're going to talk about today. A little bit. I like to bridge now, though, and the bridge I want to make is, with all of this crisis experience, along comes the internet and social media. So before, some of the things you were talking about didn't have a social media aspect to them at all. So I'm sure that whenever you saw a crisis, the first crisis that you had in social media, you thought, well, I can handle this. I've done quite a few crises, right? So could you talk a little bit about that first experience? Because I know what it is, but could you talk about that first experience in social media and tell us how brilliant that went?
So way back in 2004 or 5? No, because it was before Journey to Atlantis, wasn't it? Okay, sorry. We'll figure this out. It was before Twitter. It was before Twitter. So, I was just learning how to use Google Alerts. So 2003, 2004, trying to figure out, is it delivering what I need? It was new. It was bright and shiny. And I don't even think Facebook was open to companies yet. I think it was still a college thing. So, I bridged the gap as the director of communications. So if we had some amazing customer service people, they knew how to calm someone down, they knew how to fix their problem. We did a really, really good job of turning around bad customer experience in the traditional way. In the, I call up and I'm mad at you, I write you a letter, or by that time, we would get a lot of emails from customers, from our guests. Well, something started to bubble up that we just couldn't put our finger on, and the customer service lady was so rattled one day. She got a call from someone who just was arcing over, and even her amazing skills at calming people down didn't work, and the person was swearing and throwing out accusations and talking about how dare you, and the how dare you thing kept coming up. So in her very, very smart way, she just kept taking notes and just kept taking notes. And when she got off the phone and was kind of calmed down, they came over to my office and they said, okay, here's what just happened. We just want to talk it through with somebody. Well, what happened was this person was calling on behalf of another guest who had a bad experience, which was the only thing she was able to determine from this crazy phone call. So we're like, well, that's really weird. So the next day, she attempted to call this person back to evoke, a name. When did they come? What can you tell us what happened? And could not make it happen. Well, around that same time, about 3 or 4 days later, we didn't think anything of it. We'll keep working on it, find out what happened. Something came up in my Google Alerts. And it was really weird, and I tried to follow the thread, and it kind of broke on the way. Well, what it turned out was somebody was complaining about a guest's experience in a forum, which was closed unless you asked the moderator to get to join. So a series, it's one of those things, it's kind of like a Lemony Snicket novel, a series of unfortunate events happen. So meanwhile, this person calls again, rants and raves, still get no information. Customer who is wronged sends a registered letter which fell behind something on the loading dock and we never received, et cetera, et cetera. So when it all came down to it, what happened was a family came to the park with a special needs child. And it was not a special need that you can see by looking at someone. This child had juvenile diabetes. So, we make a lot of assumptions about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we trained a lot of our employees to recognize what people need special needs, but this was not something we trained our employees on. Every single thing that went wrong that could possibly go wrong went wrong for this family. And they turned to their group, their tribe, their support mechanism, which was this forum, and they let us have it. The problem was we didn't know they were letting us have it. And by the time we got access to the forum and got some people to send us some screenshots and really got into unraveling what really happened, it was 3 weeks old. 3 weeks of 500 parents of children with juvenile diabetes who go through some amazing difficulties day in and day out were mad as at us. And we didn't even know it. So our first foray was like, how do we get in there? What do we do? How do we fix this? And again, pre-Twitter, pre-YouTube, pre-open Facebook. So it's still really on this forum, but by now they are boycotting. They're threatening to boycott something at another of our SeaWorld parks. So what do? So we gather the team, we start to talk about how do we fix this. We're going to start to write them a letter because by now we found the registered letter they had sent us. However, we needed to go in to this forum because they were really worked up. So somebody on the management team said, you register for that forum. You become a user. You go in there, you tell them who you are, tell them you're going to fix it. Okay, I'm going in. And I did. And they cut me off at the knees in about 45 seconds. I had been in the business almost 20 years. I have been called every name in the book by every reporter, and they invented new ones for me, and they were not nice. And I realized that, that's when I realized that the world had changed. That was when we used to do one-to-one customer service, and now we were going to have to start doing that one-to-many that many of us are familiar with via Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, insert your favorite social network. It took us, but as painful as it was, fortunately, this didn't happen my first day on the job. I was seasoned, so I had a little bit of alligator skin covering parts of my body, so I didn't take it personally. But what it did do, the one thing it did was it brought the family out. So instead of third parties telling us how bad their experience was, it brought the family out. I put my phone number out there. Boy, was that scary. And said, please call me. And the father did. And I had a document open on my desk waiting for that call. I probably didn't leave my desk for 2 days. And I just started writing. I let him just talk. Let him talk, let him talk. Tell me everything that happened, all the things we did wrong. And I'm not as good at apologizing as the customer service lady, but this had gone so far beyond what the customer service team could do. And that was our foray into crises on social media. And it really forever changed how we responded as a park.
Right. And I think, I unfortunately had a front row seat to this, but I think that one of the things that happened there, and I think that happens still today, is that sometimes when we as a company go in to engage a customer online, we really talk about our point of view. Do you know what I'm saying? So we'll talk about like, well, in this case, it's because they couldn't bring a straw into the park. And that became a really important part of this. Okay, so you can't bring a straw in the park because it will hurt the animals. Do you know what I'm saying? So we don't let straws in. So it's very tempting to say, well, the reason that we don't let you do that is because this. And then what that sets up is, unfortunately, that's our point of view. Right? So that's our point of view that says, what we need is more important than your child's life or safety or health or whatever. And so, I mean, I'll just say as a parent, parents don't take too well to that, just to have somebody say, well, I mean, so that's kind of what she had. So when we lead with policy in our statements, I think that sometimes causes this wall to come up. So how would you do it differently today?
Well, I think, so the key to a company that's going to survive is turning it into an opportunity, and we certainly did. So first of all, our leadership got involved with the local chapter of the American Diabetes Association on a very, very serious level. Not money, time, volunteers, and action. We learned from them. We learned more about juvenile diabetes, what some of the challenges are for a parent of a small child who can't really communicate yet what their needs are. We also, from them, they came in and did sensitivity training for all of our employees who are customer-facing to learn what those needs are. It also led to some massive policy changes. So, parents of child diabetics, they need places to store medicine when they're going somewhere for the whole day, so we started to provide refrigerators at our first aid station where they could come in and check in, leave medicine. The whole straw issue led us to buying and storing a sippy cup with a built-in straw that would not dislodge and get into the water, because when straws get into the water, they're luminous and they look like food to the animals. So any parent who came in and needed a sippy cup for their kid, we just gave them one. Here you go. Give us your juice box. We're going to throw away this straw, but we're going to give you this. It also led to extremely higher sensitivity. So you have to sense the opportunity in the crisis. If I were to do it again today, I would not have gone in with my corporate hat on. It's like I forgot. I'm a parent too. It's like I completely forgot. If my child was in danger, I would act exactly as his mom and dad did. Exactly. And I have. But, you know, and that's what I think social media has taught us, is about humanizing. You know, I hate to say humanize your brand because that sounds pretty trite in the face of this horrible crisis, but, you know, humanize what your people do and your reactions to things. So it made some very, very positive changes for the park, and the family did come back about 6 months later. And they met with our operations team, and they met with our general manager, and we showed them all the things we had changed. And, you know, while they didn't wax poetic about us in the forum, they did go back and say, SeaWorld fixed a lot of things and we're very happy, which is probably the best we could have asked for. But if I were to do it again today, I would have taken such, I don't want to say a more casual approach, I would have just been less corporate and more human in what I've done. And obviously now I would have had other tools to find out probably sooner than 3 weeks in a registered letter.
So along those lines, I mean, we're talking about a big company here, so let's talk also. I mean, a lot of people here don't belong to big companies; they're, you know, smaller. So does everybody need like a crisis plan? And can you kind of explain to me what the pieces of a crisis plan would entail?
So just about everybody can have a crisis. I mean, your crisis might be a real threat in terms of life, property, company assets, but you know, there's a lot of, I don't want to call them perceived crisis, but there's a lot of crisis of messaging that you see in social media today, where someone says something to someone that's misunderstood, and you better get out there quick and fix it. So even if it's a crisis of messaging, which is not going to endanger property or somebody's life, it's still a crisis of your reputation, right? And so every company, even a company of one, should have a crisis plan. And it might be as informal as, think about this. You have to go a little bit to the dark side and think, what's the worst that can happen? Okay? And I've had this happen. Okay, and she's going to tell you what happened to her once at her swim meet. Okay, so I'm out with my family, and I find out that somebody's registered a DDoS. What do I do? I don't have an IT department. What do I do? You know, you have to have, in the tech world, they call it redundancy. You have to have processes in place so even if you are not at your computer and able to fix something, someone can step in and help you. Obviously, someone trusted. It's not, you know, give my passwords out to everybody. So you need to have a plan in place. What if I can't access my channels, my company, my people? Who can step in and help me, even if I'm a company of one? So it made me realize that you know, you have to have that sort of trusted friend or trusted advisor who can, okay, I can log into your website, I'll go into the back, I'll shut down the comments, or I'll fix the spam, or I'll clear out, or I will, you know, forward this to you so you can see it on text.
Yeah, I like to call it like a lifeline. I don't know if you guys remember that show where, you know, they could call in their lifeline. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I don't know if you remember that show. And, you know, they get to a point and they got to call their lifeline in. And if as a company of one or few, like I am, you have to have somebody that you can trust to do that. So, yes, she's right. I've had this happen to me before, too. I had a situation where an influencer, a very big influencer, was upset with something that I said, and wrote a big blog post with my name and, you know, and how horrible I was and all these just terrible things, like I can't believe this person would say these things. And what I had done is basically just talked about my pet peeves in social media. Like, these were my pet peeves, 1, 2, 3, and one of them he had done. So he was really mad because he's like, well, you know, and I hadn't attacked him. I hadn't even mentioned him actually in the article, but he just recognized himself in it, and so he came after me. And unfortunately, I'd been mucking around in the back end of my blog, and I turned off my comments on that inadvertently. I didn't mean to. So when it started, the people all flocked to this article, and they were like, and then she doesn't even leave her comments open for criticism or like talk back, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm sitting at a swim meet, as Fran says, watching my kid, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up, with like messages, because I got them all via email, so like hundreds of emails were coming in. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I'm looking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no way to turn my comments on. I was on like a mobile phone, and at the time you couldn't you couldn't do that. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I called somebody immediately, and I gave them my password and said, turn my comments now. And so he did. And it all worked out, sort of. I mean, it still was a huge disaster, and it took me 3 days of working through it to get through it, answering comments and going to his comment stream and talking to people. And in the end, I had a lot of people say, wow, she handles crises so well, and she doesn't take anything personally. And so that's, I mean, the first thing is don't take it personally, right? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of these people have done, especially in brands. You've heard about brands that answer questions on their Facebook wall in a really snarky or upset sort of way, and that's just an individual person taking something that was said on a brand page personally. Do you know what I'm saying? So letting personal stuff go is really, really important. Could you walk us through your sections of a plan real quick? Okay. So she's got a really great sections of a plan, so get your notes out.
So I queued up a tweet last night because I've got a blog post on this with the essential elements of a crisis communication plan. Not I'm promoting my blog, but it's a lot to try and write down. So it's a handy thing you can go and look at later. So when I work with a company now or a small organization to write a crisis communication plan, the sections of the plan are the same almost with no changes for every single company. But what's inside each section is different based on that company. Hello, people in the corner. I want to give you a little love over there. And when my approach, which I don't think it's unique to people who work in the sort of the crisis section, is you have to write that crisis plan as if you are not going to be there to help it. That the joke used to say, if I get run over by a bus, you can do this without me. Okay, so maybe you want to call it plug and play or WYSIWYG or something like that. But either way, you have to write it as if the person who might have to act on it has never seen it. So it has to completely deliver the expectations. So I usually have 2 or 3 sentences at the beginning that talk about the purpose. What are we trying to do here? Okay? Because you need a guiding light, and if you're in crisis, you've got to act within about an hour. An hour is 4 days in old school time. We used to have 3 hours to get a statement ready for the press when I first started at SeaWorld in the late 80s. 3 hours now? Can you imagine waiting 3 hours now? You are toast. You are toast on Twitter, big time. So you have a purpose, and then the second section is usually a definition. What is a crisis? Now, that seems really obvious, but again, you need to go a little bit to the dark side and think about what are the things that could happen to you or your organization. So I just finished writing a crisis plan for a small natural gas utility in the Hill Country outside San Antonio, and we sat down with the leadership team to talk about what are the likelihoods. Okay, there were only 6. There were only 6. Okay, a gas leak, an explosion from a gas leak, a vehicle accident on behalf of, caused by one of our employees. They didn't want to talk about workplace violence, but workplace violence should be one that every company is prepared for in this day and age. So a weather-related incident. And the other one, because they are, many of you, this is Houston, y'all are familiar with oil and gas, heavily regulated industry. We had one that was somewhat unspecified. So a large-scale disaster involving compromised utilities. Because in that case, there's a whole triage of organizations that are in charge to which they need to jump in and be in lockstep with, right? Somebody else is in charge, an incident commander, a first responder. And so there were really only 5 or 6. But what that allowed us to do was envision what would we say if that happened and develop some standard responses. And again, it's not like being dehuman, but when push comes to shove, if you have to have legal review everything, these are responses that are in advance. So you could say on such and such a date and such a time, comma, a potential, fill in the blank, leak, fire, etc., occurred at location. We are, what are we doing right now? We are responding to the incident. We are taking direction from the authorities. We are, and then what customers or people should do. If you have questions, please fill in the blank. So if we know the phone lines are working, you can insert the phone number. If they're not, follow this channel for further updates. So that allowed us to develop some standard responses, which meant you could buy some time. You could get out there in 25 or 30 minutes, and what do then? You're creating an awareness. We know, because recognizing that there's been an incident is the first step of managing a crisis. So you're saying something, but you're not really saying anything. We are aware, and we're on the job. We're working on it. We'll get back to you. So defining the crisis is very important. And then the third element of every plan is crisis preparation. So this section is a little bit different with every organization. Again, did we get run over by a bus? And the largest category of crises for most companies are a weather-related incident with interruption of service. So think hurricanes, tornadoes, severe thunderstorm, if you're in the Northeast, ice storms, or even Dallas, ice storms, right, interfere with power. So you have to assume that none of your devices are going to work. You have to assume you've got nothing. So how do we prepare for the crisis? We evaluate the plan once a year, or once every 6 months, or once every 3 months, whatever your management team is comfortable with. Make sure everybody's happy with how it is, and here's where it is. You may find the plan on the shared drive under X. You must also, this creates the expectation for your leadership, print the plan, take it home with the phone list, because you have to assume that you're not going to have your devices. There have been many times when the power is out where I am still old school calling the media, right, to say, or in person, they show up and you're handwriting and giving them a statement. So it still happens. I mean, think of Hurricane Katrina and other hurricane incidents where, power is out for days. Like, you don't have that. So what is your crisis preparation? And what are also the essential tools you might need if the power is out, and where are they? So again, going back to the most recent one I did, the natural gas utility, one of their very important tools in a crisis are locator maps. Where are the pipelines? Where are the gas lines? And so they have them on the field reps' iPads, but if the iPads aren't working and downloaded, the maps are printed twice per year, and they are filed on this shelf in this office. So if push comes to shove, you go and grab the paper maps and you go out to locate the lines. Okay? So that was part of their crisis preparation. The next section is who's your management team. You need to outline who are the players, and I prefer to do that by roles rather than names of person, because roles can change in between the times that you are cycling through reviewing your plan. So the president of the company, or the operations manager, or naming those people and what they're expected to do. And then the most important part of the crisis plan, that's kind of all setting the stage in the background and preparing you. The most important part is your crisis timeline. So those 4 steps. What are you going to do, and how soon are you going to do it, and where, with whom? So identifying, discovery, there's a discovery section. We've identified this crisis, and we're gathering information on it, which sometimes is as quick as 2 phone calls, right, or 2 emails, or a text message. And then we are gathering the team to determine our response, which again might be a quick conference call, it might be meeting in the hallway, it might be you talking to yourself. What am I going to do about this? Because we do have conversations with ourselves, and we are solo practitioners, right? Then you decide your response, and then you communicate the response, and then you evaluate, monitor, shift change, adjust, and lather, rinse, repeat, just like the shampoo bottle says. Then you start again, because if you get a response out in that 1 hour time frame, you are usually communicating with only half the information of what may be revealed to you in the next hour or 24 hours. So having that process timeline is really important. And then after that, standard responses for what are your most typical crises to streamline. And I've missed something. A media list. with your management team and all their phone numbers. So again, assuming that this is all I got, and I got a paper and a pencil, and this is how I'm going to operate. So I always assume that everything, the world is crashing down around me, and I've got, a legal tablet, a pencil, and my crisis plan.
And this crisis plan is like 100 pages, right?
No, the really long ones are about 7 pages. That if you have a really big media list and a really big team, management team phone list. But most of them are 4 to 5 pages long at most. They really need to be flexible. They need to be somewhat general. They need to provide the guidance and some of the guardrails. So, for example, if in a certain crisis, say if it involves the injury or death of an employee, okay, in a large company, there may be in your crisis timeline, if that happens, that situation must do this before you can communicate about it. If you're in a highly regulated industry, healthcare, you have the HIPAA laws. In financial services, there's all sorts of disclosure laws. So having those standard responses is really great because if you get legal's blessing on it, if you're in those regulated industries, then it really helps speed up your response. But they need to be somewhat general, and you can't really do a complete if this then that kind of matrix flowchart because you will drive yourself crazy.
Because all kinds of things can happen. So that's great. So you have a plan now, but a lot of times these crises are self-imposed. I like to call them self-imposed crises. Like, I think one of the biggest possibilities, especially if you have a company, is that an employee will do something kind of boneheaded. So one of them that I can think of right off the bat is these personal accounts tweeting things that are supposed to be on their personal account, but they do it on a main account. One of the ones that was recent, I just have it written down, this Ferguson, for the Ferguson situation, CSIS, which is like an association kind of think tank place, they tweeted to Amnesty International about something that they wrote, and it was, let's just say, less than pleasant. And it was supposedly on his personal account, but he did it on the Amnesty International account. So that's one. The other one I can think about right off the bat, which is in the last week, was DiGiorno Pizza. And all of you have heard about that one. So, but the ones who haven't, basically DiGiorno Pizza took the Why I Stayed hashtag, which was a hashtag about domestic violence. And they said, because there was because they ordered pizza. And later they said, well, we didn't know. The intern did it. We didn't know what that hashtag meant. We just thought it was trending, so we jumped on it, right? So, newsjacking. So, boneheaded stuff like that. And you might find yourself making a mistake like that, even though you think you never would. So, what's your recommendation for dealing with boneheaded employee mistakes on social media?
So there's some controls you can take into place because you're not on the job 24/7, and you have to delegate a lot of some of the day-to-day management of your social media. So there's a couple things I recommend. So if I put my personal accounts on one publishing platform and I put my business accounts on another. So if I'm using Hootsuite for something, then I make sure those people are on Buffer. I have clients that are in Sprout Social as a platform. Okay, that really, it's a great platform. It's expensive, but boy does it do some sweet things. And if that is something that is part of your day-to-day, then you need to make some decisions about roles and responsibilities. And the nice thing about some of these tools now is you can give them permissions that don't let them fly on their own yet. So if you're concerned, then you have a period of, okay, I'm going to review everything you're going to say before I push it live. And, that helps to kind of control those potential. I think having a social media playbook that talks about tone of voice, that talks about subjects we don't get involved in. I think every organization, even on their day-to-day, needs to talk about what issues that are not specifically related to our brand will we speak about, and which ones will we not. So perhaps in the DiGiorno incident, okay, I would venture a guess that if DiGiorno had a social media playbook, commenting on domestic violence was not part of it, right? I mean, we're pizza.
What about just researching the hashtag?
Right, and that's the other thing. So, you know, to me, part of your day-to-day of social media, I never use a hashtag unless I've clicked through, not just on Facebook. I Google it, I do it on Twitter, I do it on Facebook. You know, click through that hashtag and find out what's going on, A. And B, never passing a link on a social network that you haven't clicked all the way through to believe that it's a real link. There's a lot of junk out there, right? You know it, and it's very easy when you're like, oh man, I got to get 5 retweets out today about healthcare or health education or something, and you know, if you don't click through to them, you might find out, you know, I have a healthcare client that is very Christian oriented, and so there are certain topics in healthcare that are verboten, like no, do not use ever. And so I have to click through and read through every blog post to make sure that when we're sharing health education information, it's within the parameters of what they would treat. So, you know, those are ways to be prepared in a crisis by just being smarter in your day-to-day operation of social media. Did I miss something? Roles and responsibilities, separate your networks, and you know, I guess taking the time to read the subject matter before you pass it along.
So let's say that you do all that, and you know, your employees are amazing and they never make any mistakes. So we need to now move on to like actual crises where people are attacking you. So can you talk a little bit about like when people are attacking you, the types of people that are involved in that, and maybe give us an example of a time that happened to you, and sort of how you handled it.
So part of my managing social media for several clients, I have a healthcare client, and you know, part of my job is to keep their social media going. We have SMART goals, we're measuring, but you know, I go on to their page every single day. Facebook and Twitter are their 2 channels of choice, and I scan the actual channel. So we're using a publishing platform, but I physically go to the channel because ratings and reviews don't pull into any platform on Facebook. So if you are managing a brand page or an organization page, those ratings and reviews are right up there under the a fan count with stars and a rating. And now you can click through and it tells you how many 4s you have and how many 1s, and it gives you all those ratings and reviews. They're not pulled into any platform. You don't see those in Hootsuite, you won't see them in Sprout Social. I haven't checked Buffer, but I'm assuming. So you need to go and look at that stuff all the time. And in that scan of a channel one day for this particular client, somebody came on in the ratings and reviews section and gave them a 1 and just had this total rant, really long, 200 and some words. What? It was talking about identifiable patient information, which is a big no-no in healthcare. And it was accusing of something against this patient, that we weren't caring for them in the way, so in their treatment. So I can't really say too much beyond that. But so okay, so it's not pulling into my platform, so I take a screen grab and I send it, and fortunately I saw it in about 30 minutes because twice a day, the beginning of the day and the end of the day, I go in and just physically look at their Facebook page. So I escalate it. That's another part of your policy. Have an escalation process. So we had one. Our escalation process included, we had a group email. You send it to everyone in the group because they have an internal team of 5 or 6. I'm the external. And we try to respond. Our benchmark is 24 hours, but this was a crisis. So in the email forward, I put urgent, need reply immediately, so the team knows that it's something else I've seen. That's our code, right? It's like 911. So we, in the ensuing couple of hours, now, of course, when this came up, right after that, I left for a live press event on behalf of the same client. So some of us were out in the field and some of us were in the desk. So, of course, what happens? You know, there's no Wi-Fi where we're at, and I can't, you know, I can sort of look at mobile, but I can't see everything on the mobile platform because, you know, it's Facebook. So what happened is they escalated it in turn to their corporate parent because it's patient information and legal gets involved immediately. To their credit, they started drafting a response immediately, and we had one within 3 hours, which is pretty darn good when you got legal involved. So we go out and we put it out in our channels. So, but meanwhile, I've got myself and another person. In that ensuing 3 hours, all these people are coming onto the page and putting things in reviews. They knew exactly where the soft underbelly was, because they knew you cannot remove a ratings or review from Facebook. You can't hide it. You can do nothing to it except comment on it as a brand. And they knew that. So to our credit, the situation escalated in some ways only on the Facebook page. And so we started watching the people who were clicking, and it wasn't fancy like spreadsheet, flow chart, but I started a list next to my desk. Okay, these people, radical. These people, moderate. These people, just clicking like or asking a question or seem to have no position one way or the other, right? So it was con, neutral, pro, maybe. And then started clicking through to see who those people were. So in doing that, found out that they had spun up a cause page for this person already, and they were going around to all sorts of different groups to get this group really all spun up, very vocal. So the people started to evolve into 3 groups. Really radical, we will do anything to have this fixed. We'll say anything. We'll talk to anyone. And they every single time, and we had a lot of posts that were related to hospital events going up. They would put completely unrelated comments onto these posts of, somebody came to visit the children and brought them quilts that day or whatever, things like that are like heartwarming and lovely. Oh no, on the post. So, but we started to see who the moderates were, and a moderate voice emerged, so I started to watch this person because I thought this person might be able to change the voice of the radical people. And the person tried for a number of hours, could not get them to see reason, and finally left the group. So what we did was we responded, and then 3 hours later we responded again because the legal team made a determination that enough information had been released about this patient that it was in the public domain and not at the will of the healthcare provider. And that's an important legal determination on their part. So we went back in again. But also the family themselves seemed to be a little bit unaware of what was going on around them because they had a critically ill person, and so they didn't know what was going on. Anyway, long story short, we kept it on Facebook. So we did 3 things. We kept it on Facebook when the particular case was so difficult. It could have spilled not only to national social media, but national traditional media. So we kept it on Facebook, and we watched those people. And sure enough, as soon as their needs were met, they left the page. And we watched the page for days, and we saw all these page unlikes happen, particularly on Facebook, a few days later. And so once they did, we left the official statements up on our Facebook page, but we then did hide all the comments that were irrelevant on the irrelevant comments on hospital activity posts, because we felt, you're gone, and we did it with a lot of thought, but we just said that's it because we didn't want those to stay. And one of them was, congratulating a particular leader on their years of service, and there were all these lovely comments about thank you, you're wonderful, you're this and that, and then someone's coming on going, we thought kind of not fair for that person, So you get those 3 kinds of people. The important thing that we saw at the end of this, first of all, we contained it to Facebook, for which we were extremely humbled and gratitude all over the place. The other thing is that we realized that those advocates, as vocal as they were a small portion, maybe 5 or 10% of the people that came to our page that week, but that there was this larger group, our loyal fans, who were waiting to see what we said. And so if you didn't say it and attend to the crisis in a way, they want to know you're on the job, you're taking care of it, you're satisfying our needs as a loyal fan. And so that was really important that we we kept that dialogue going. So that's kind of how we contained it.
So I am seeing that our time is like coming very short. Oh, well, I mean, it's good. We started late, so we'll go a few minutes over. But I would like to give you guys some time to ask questions about crises maybe you've had or things you're worried about. And there's already one with her hand up. So do you have a question? Yeah? Yeah.
Well, hi, I'm Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I work for the government of Israel, so my job is pretty much a full-time crisis. On multiple levels.
She works for the government of Israel. For those of you on the cast.
So what I'm curious about, obviously we have a lot of people like activists, let's call it, like us, like on the face here. How do you get people that maybe are more moderate voices that become your brand ambassadors on an ongoing active basis?
So how do you get moderate people to become your brand ambassadors for an organization that attracts a lot of detractors, determined detractors, terrorist detractors? Have you dealt with terrorists? Actually, yesterday it's so funny, Karen, because we said, we're not going to bring up terrorism. We were going to bring up I did. I should have known that. We were talking about ISIS. We're like, no. Probably not the best.
I think the monitoring on the channel, as I did with my much crisis for my healthcare client, is really important. There are ways now too that you can identify who are the most influential, and a lot of tools do that. Whereas when we first did the thing with the child with diabetes, there was no, you can't find out, oh, this person has 15,000 followers and this is 500. Let's get to him or her first because they have a better chance of spreading our message or not. I think it's one of those, you've got to chip away at it. I think it's kind of like a punch list that never ends. You have to decide who are they. And honestly, look, in anything in politics, it doesn't matter whether it's Israel, America, or any kind of smaller community, moving moderates is absolutely the hardest thing to do because people on either end of the spectrum have very specific views, and the people in the middle are just kind of happy. I'm cool. It's good, So, but I think, your tone of voice can they may not be motivated to action, but they're listening. That's the thing you have to never let yourself forget, because it's easy to say, oh my God, please just retweet this, somebody, come on. You're standing, sitting at your computer talking to yourself like you've lost it. Please retweet me. But they're listening, and that's the most important thing. I think also identifying, can you influence them in another way?
Oh my goodness, everybody. And I would say I'm going to go here and then here. But the spiral of silence is also a big problem. And I actually tweeted about that yesterday, but there's a new Pew Research report out called The Spiral of Silence. And if somebody does a real quick search of that and puts it in the Twitter stream, I'd be thrilled. But basically what it just says is that people over time, if they see radical differences, they won't say what they think because they're not going to put themselves out there. There's like 36% of people say, I think it was 36 or in the 30s, will talk about stuff online, whereas in person 89% would. So the 89%, there's a big gap between 30-something% and 80-something%. And those people do have an opinion. They're just not going to say it and put themselves out there, especially if they feel the environment won't support their idea. And let's go over here. Yes.
So I actually just conducted a social media study and published it on the Likeable Media blog, and it was where I went through and tweeted and Facebook major companies, Coca-Cola and Apple and places like that. Questions, negative comments, and praise. And I was blown away by how many of them did not respond to me at all. 37% never responded to me. And on Twitter, only 50% of people interacted with me at all. And 75% of those that I sent negative comments to did not even acknowledge that there was anything. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think, to me that's customer service on social media. And I think many companies have had a very, very hard time adopting. One of the things that I most loved about my time at Rackspace was the ambitious customer service outreach they had on Twitter. So even as far back as 2008 and 2009, their benchmark was if a customer does an @Rackspace or @Rackspace Hosting, or there were 5 Twitter accounts at the time, we must respond to them within 20 minutes. Now, I can tell you there's only a handful of times, and once in a while if I get really frustrated and there's a certain, person, company, large, that provided maybe cable television services for my family and got so frustrated because my husband sat on the support phone for 4 hours that I finally just tweeted, hey, at blah, 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 what is up with your phone system? Our cable is down, blah, blah. And I got a response in 3 hours. But my husband had already been on the phone 45 minutes, so we kind of considered my response came faster than his. And my husband's Australian, so they all didn't understand his accent once he got through to somebody. They're like, what? So I had to get on the phone and interpret English to English. Anyway, that was interesting. But I think you are right. Sometimes they don't even acknowledge praise, and that was one of the things in working with clients is that we try and thank people. We thank them for retweets. We thank them for following. We have gratitude when people reach out to us, and I think companies are having a hard time getting the hang of that.
And I also think, I've got Julie here first, but one of the things you also have to remember that a lot of these people are doing this through their marketing department or through their agency, and so it's not being considered a social media customer service channel, and so they don't see it that way. And honestly, if you're like a person that's hired as an agency, you don't have any information. You don't have any power to handle any of these situations. So I think that companies, especially in the large scale, have to think about that. Julie?
Just really quickly, a number of my clients are extraordinarily conservative, as in cautious. Mm-hmm. And you cannot respond to anybody without thoroughly vetting who they are. Because they might be someone you shouldn't be talking to for one reason or another. Mm. And with that kind of time consumption with a single person and monitoring everything, you run into some snags. So I think sometimes the expectations of the public on social media are slightly unrealistic, but larger brands do have bigger teams.
And more money, hopefully. So she was saying that a lot of her clients are very cautious and conservative, and so they require you to come back and vet everything, which I know intimately.
You know who
I know exactly because it's our client. Go ahead. Anyway.
But the question that I had, is based on what Karen said. I know that when I get special comments which come in because those very same cautious clients are also kind of liking rods. I have kind of my few favorite ways to address people. So I wonder if you, Fran, could share with the group your favorite ways to come at the you suck and I hate them.
So Fran's favorite, this sounds like a blog post title. Fran's favorite ways of countering you suck and, what did you say? And I hate all of this. And I hate you. You suck and I hate you. And believe me, those are blog post titles. I have a great story about that, which I don't have time to tell right now with Rob.
Well, I think, first of all, again, it's not taking it personally. And that's really, I think, probably the hardest lesson for us all to learn, because you're like, I'm really a nice person. How come you don't know that? So not taking it personally, I do try and step outside myself a little bit to, keep my thick skin on. I think the other thing is I have, it sounds dumb, but I have 400 ways to say I'm sorry without saying I'm sorry. Because I think if you start with the humility aspect of it, when someone gives you those horrible comments, that it does disarm them a little bit. I'm so sorry you feel that way. Kind of is a great way to start it. That is really my only thing. And then I try and take the time to get someone on the phone that I respect. If I have any, if in my gut I have any, if anything is going, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing it long enough that I have fairly good instincts. I run it past someone. I get someone on the phone. I might call Julie or Cammie or a friend that works with me on channel management for a couple accounts. Say, okay, I'm getting ready to send this. Does it sound okay? Or what questions will I have? And then for the standard ones that are non-crisis, we have a standard responses document. Again, to the healthcare client I mentioned before, 80% of the questions we get on Facebook are, how do I make a donation, or how do I volunteer my time? And there's 3 ways to do it. You know, you have to register, you have to, here's the phone number, here's the email, and here's a handy little thing of our guidelines on what you can and can't donate. Like they can't have balloons, and they can't have like all these hospital regulations, right? But now, cut and paste, thank you for inquiring, here are our guidelines, and here's what to do next. So, you know, minimize the ones that are kind of time sucks that are easy, so that you can spend time on the ones that are hard.
Great advice. Yes?
At what point do you delete or ban users when they're like, I hate you, you suck, you know, I mean, at what point do you...
So at what point do you...
On the company,
yeah, at what point do you delete or ban somebody from your social media pages, except for you can't from those reviews.
Right.
But otherwise...
Okay, so this is when it's important to make sure that you do have a policy that you post on your Facebook page, you post on Twitter or whatever, to say this is our social media policy. I was a board member for Guide Dogs of Texas, which provides guide dogs for the blind, and I helped them get started in their social media as part of my board service to them, so I was a volunteer. And there was an incident on their Facebook page where somebody came on and started saying things and using 4-letter words and calling people names. And fortunately, in my counsel with them, we had literally just finished writing what the policy would be, and we had just uploaded it to our About page. And basically what we said is we enforce, believe, whatever the term was, all of the terms of service on this channel, as well as we believe in, civil discourse, honest conversation. We will not accept expletives, calling people names, etc. So the executive director called me. He goes, we just got this comment. I was in the car. I said, I'll be back in my office in 10 minutes. He said, should we delete it? I said, not yet. So we created a post that said, we deleted a comment made on our post, and here's why we did. It violates our terms of service, it makes accusations, claims, etc., etc. Well, the interesting thing was, we deleted the comment and uploaded that post immediately. Well, let me tell you, the fans came out of the woodwork. You go, we love you, this organization is amazing, they do great stuff. Who would say bad things about you? I mean, and then we got more love and comments for about 24 to 48 hours. But, other than that, like with the other one I was referring to earlier with the healthcare client, our statement with the comments below it stood. And the only comments we removed were the ones where people were attacking on the irrelevant posts. And even those, we removed those about 2 to 3 weeks later.
You didn't ban them. So.
Well, we did not. First of all, it takes a lot of time, and most of those people left anyway. As we could see from our page likes, because I had that little list, right? Activists, moderates, and just sort of hanging out, and I could see who had left the page. So,
also, I would say coordinated attacks. Like this happens where people will get together, like the one you talked about, and they'll on another page decide to go together and attack a page.
Yes.
And they'll do 15 or 20 comments all at once. So I actually have no problem deleting those, because those people are actually starting warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, they're starting a warfare situation. So just, in some cases you can do that. Leaving negative comments is actually good sometimes too. I'm not saying it's not. We will leave negative comments often, and people will come to defend you, as she said.
Yeah.
So yes, Louis. Well, actually, I have her. But is this a follow-up for this? Oh, Louis. Okay,
Yeah.
go.
How do you balance seeing your response versus verifying the information that you get so you have the full story and not reacting to something that's creepy?
So how do you balance not having all the information and getting a response out in a timely manner? So I use what I call bridging responses, and so it really it does two things. It tells people you're on the job, You tell them you don't have all the information, and you're going to get back to them. So we get a lot of inquiries about on our healthcare page. Hi, is Dr. So-and-so still around? There's no way I can verify every single doctor that works in this large healthcare system. So thank you very much for contacting us. We are researching your question, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. That works in a crisis too. Thank you for your comment. We are investigating or we are aware and researching, and we'll get back to you as soon as we have some information. Stay tuned, or watch this page for a post later on. And I never give a time. I never say I'll get back to you in 20 minutes. I just say we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Because you can say an hour and then it's delayed by, well, so-and-so hasn't read it and we can't post it until he does, and so that's how I balance it. Bridging responses, they at least know you're there and listening.
I also call it the incremental release of information. Yes. You just kind of release what you have as you have it. And I have been promising you, this is going to be the last question because, guys, we're late, but go.
Oh gosh. I worked with a company, and an organization, in fact, that we helped support had done something major protocol for the news, and then people were trying to get us to
drag you in.
Yeah, it was just this whole ripple effect of this organization did something, and they were attacking everybody.
So she was talking about a time that she was working with another company, and the other company had a crisis, but they dragged the company that wasn't in crisis into the crisis. Right. So what do you do about that?
Well, we live in a complicated world, and every company has complicated relationships, and not the least of which is your supply chain, right? And so that is the most likely crisis, is my supplier or my vendor is in a crisis, and am I going to get dragged into it? You as a company have to decide, how do we respond to those? So I can tell you two different thoughts. So whenever there was a roller coaster incident, we would get called at SeaWorld because we had roller coasters. And you're not there when something happens at a park in California or Belgium or, you name it. Insert any city or country that has roller coasters at a theme park. And so we would say, we don't know the specifics of this incident, so we feel very, we hesitate to comment. But, we wish them the best and that kind of thing. And it kind of it's sort of like industry, everybody in the industry kind of wants to stick together. You don't want to throw your suppliers under the bus. But, other companies will say, we don't know anything about it. And that's an honest answer, too. Yes, they are. And maybe all you need to do is confirm, yes, they are our supplier, and we've had a great working relationship with them. As far as what they're going through right now, we're not really involved, so we can't really say anything more than that. Without using the dreaded no comment, we've had great relationships with them. Because if you had a bad relationship with them, you're not going to say that publicly anyway. You're just going to terminate the contract sometime, right? But it's hard because chances are you'll get dragged into one of those faster than have one of your own because of all of our complicated relationships.
Great. Oh my goodness. So there's so much more. If you want to, we're going to stay for a few minutes after. You can come up and talk to her, but could you give Fran a hand and thank her so much for coming? Hopefully you got one or two gems in that you can take with you today. Is there anybody here who has a job? Could you do me a favor, Melissa, in the broadcast? Thank you guys out in Google Plus land. Does anybody have a job that they want to fill, that they want to talk about? Oh, Melissa does, but